Hello everyone. In this video, I want to go through an intro to performance debugging. So if you've tried building an app on a TV, you're probably developing it on your browser, and you get to the point where you launch it on a TV device and you're like, whoa, what just happened? This is very slow. Things aren't working. It's janky. So I want to show you how you would begin to debug those type of scenarios. And the first thing is I'm on a desktop. Your desktop computer has a ton more processing power than on the device, on a TV device. But we can kind of mimic a TV device if we go into the inspector. So I'm going to right click, go inspect, and this is the solid demo app that I have running here. And what we have by going into the inspector is now we can see what's happening, or we can start to debug. And in Chrome, there is a performance tab. This is my best friend. I highly recommend you get familiar with this tool. But I'm going to go in the performance tab, and there's a little gear icon here. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to do CPU throttling to a 20x slowdown. And this will really slow down the performance of the site. That will more likely mimic what's going to happen on the device. And now we can start to see or start to debug, our slow points on the device. And so let's say going under this left menu was a slow point. You want to see what's happening when you actually click left to get on the menu and come back. And in order to do that, you're going to click this little record button here, and that's going to initialize the profiler. And right now I'm not interacting or pressing any key presses, but now I want to record that one key press. So I'm going to press left. I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to click right. And now I'm going to click stop. And all it's doing is recording those two interactions on the screen. And you can see that most of the time it's nothing, there's no interactions. And then all of a sudden you get a little hump of yellow, and that is the key press that happens. So we can actually zoom in. So I'm using my mouse wheel to zoom in, and we can see there's an interaction here. So this is the keyboard press of pressing left, and it took 15.46 milliseconds to be handled, or to run all the JavaScript that occurred during that key press. And again, this is with a 20x slowdown. So now I can see everything that happened during that 15 milliseconds by just continuing to zoom in. I can see that there was state changes that happened because we want things to change on the screen. That all has to be processed. There's a new shader that is occurring that has to be created. So overall, a key press, according to like the web standards, is supposed to be handled in about 50 milliseconds or less. So we're still in good shape here. What you want to see is where is the jank, and most of the solid demo app is very smooth because it's not a full-fledged app. So full-fledged apps have a lot more complexity to it, a lot more happening. But we'll get into that probably in another video. But right now, I just want to go into here's how you can start to debug. And any one of these things, if you see it's taking too long, you can click on it and you can jump into that code. So it will actually say this one function took 2.83 milliseconds. So you want to look for something that's really long. And what you'll have up here in the performance tab is if something is taking a long time, it actually will mark it in red. So it'll create a red block to say, hey, this took a really long time to process. And then you can actually jump into that code. You can see what's happening, and you can see if it's something you can optimize. And I highly recommend, the simplest way to optimize is copy the function, drop it into ChatGPT, and be like, how can I make this faster, or can you optimize this? So that's one trick that I would recommend. And another thing, it's important to note with interactions and responsiveness, just because you see a lot of yellow, that's not necessarily bad. So what happens is we're doing an animation, and by kicking off an animation, so this key press changes some nodes to change their alpha or their X position, etc. And then that starts an animation loop. So then after that, the renderer now takes the instructions, and every frame it's trying to update or run the animation by changing steps of the animation over a set amount of time. So as long as these are under 16 milliseconds, you should be good at handling 30 frames per second. If these start to get too long, maybe you're animating too many things, you got to change some things. But those are the things that you want to look for. Another thing that you can do is once you do a performance recording, you can actually share this with someone else. And one way of doing that is you click this little download here, and it will actually ask you, do you want to save the trace, which it will just save it as a file. And what I recommend you do is if you want to share it with someone, zip it up first, and that will reduce its size by 1/10. These can get pretty large, but this will allow you to share it with someone else. And they can also look at the performance recording just by importing that performance recording into the debugger. So with that, I hope that was a good quick intro. There is more debugging. I have the inspector turned off. So I want to emphasize that as well, that if you are debugging or you're using, if you're releasing to production, the inspector should be off once you go out of development mode. But just in case, make sure you have the inspector off because that is creating HTML nodes. And so if you see a whole bunch of HTML nodes, the inspector is on. And that eats up a ton of performance running the inspector, and you'll even get a console.warning in your log. So if that's on, don't try to do performance measurements and check what's slowing down with the inspector on. Make sure that's disabled first. All right, so hopefully that's enough to get you started. If you have more questions, feel free to leave a comment. I'm more than happy to go into details about other things. I'll give one more example before we go, which is let's record. And again, you can record at any time. So I'm going to clear this recording. I'm going to click record, and now I'm going to go into hit enter here, and we load a new page, and we can stop. And again, you can see the whole performance recording, and you can see here now we have the little red blocks, which show these were long tasks, which is acceptable because we're switching pages. We're going from one page to another. So maybe that takes 200 milliseconds or something. Here we're at maybe 150 milliseconds. And some of that is because we're making API calls. We got to wait for the data. Then it has to load. It's got to render a new screen. So that can take time. But this is where you want to be smart with your transitions and kind of give a good user experience. So you can actually even see in the recording here, you can actually slowly drag and say, okay, what happens to switch between those screens? You can see how it renders. And as long as it's a good experience for the user, maybe it's okay. But if there's areas where you think you can improve upon, again, you can just zoom in and be like, what took so long? Like fetch, this is the browser making API calls. You're not going to be able to optimize that any further. But if there's something that's happening over and over, or you're doing too many animations, that could cause performance. So you got to limit the amount of things that you actually do on the device. All right, and with that, again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to drop a comment on the video and thumbs up and share with others. Thanks for watching.